It all started with a phone call I almost ignored. The number was unfamiliar, and I was knee-deep in paperwork, sorting out the last remnants of my late grandfather's estate. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end identified himself as a land surveyor working in a suburban development about 20 miles outside the city. "I think we need to talk," he said. That one sentence sent me down a rabbit hole I never expected to enter, a twisted saga of greed, oversight, and, eventually, poetic justice. I had inherited the land about a year before, tucked into the tail end of my grandfather's will. It was one of those afterthought bequests you don't expect to amount to much. A few acres of undeveloped property that had been in the family for generations, untouched and largely forgotten. My grandfather never mentioned it during his final years. My parents knew about it vaguely, but never cared to look into its value. It had simply been sitting there, waiting, for decades. No fences, no structures, no maintenance, just trees, grass, and, as I would soon learn, opportunity. When I first drove out to see the land, I was expecting raw wilderness. Instead, I was met with manicured lawns, SUV-lined driveways, and rows of nearly identical homes. Kids played basketball in the driveways. There was even a community clubhouse with a pool, complete with WA banners fluttering in the breeze. At first, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn, but the GPS was adamant. I was standing on my land. The surveyor, whose name was Daniel, met me near the entrance of the neighborhood. He was visibly nervous. "You don't know, do you?" he asked. "Know what?" I replied. He sighed and pulled out a large set of blueprints and old county plat maps. According to every official document he showed me, I owned a significant portion of the land the HOA was currently sitting on. Specifically, 61 of the homes were built on parcels that, legally, were part of my inheritance. At first, I didn't believe him. It had to be a mistake. Surely, no one could just build a neighborhood on someone else's land without asking, without paying. But as he walked me through the maps, deed transfers, and zoning records, a picture began to emerge, one riddled with negligence and deliberate ignorance. The developers had acquired surrounding parcels but somehow overlooked mine, which sat right in the middle of their plans. Whether by accident or due to a paperwork mix-up, they had plowed ahead with construction anyway. Worse yet, the WA had been formed, homes had been sold, and not a single person along the chain of events noticed, or cared, that their entire community was built on stolen ground. I went home with a headache that night. I spent the next several weeks neck-deep in research. I hired my own land surveyor. I dug through county archives, title records, and legal databases. Every shred of evidence pointed to one unavoidable conclusion: I was the rightful owner. Not just of the dirt beneath the homes, but of the airspace, the driveways, the pipes, and the very foundation of each of those 61 houses. Legally, it was all mine. The implications were staggering. I tried reaching out to the WA board first, hoping for a civilized conversation. They responded with arrogance, telling me I was misinformed and that the matter had been handled years ago. When I asked for documentation, they offered none. Their lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter within the week, claiming I was harassing the community. That was when I knew this wouldn't be settled with polite negotiations. My attorney was as shocked as I was. She confirmed my ownership rights and filed a quiet title action in court. We sent letters to every homeowner informing them of the pending litigation. The panic was immediate. Suddenly, I was being called a scam artist, a conman, even a greedy heir trying to evict families. But all I had done was inherit a piece of land. The chaos wasn't of my making. It was the developers, the HOAs, and the county's failure to do due diligence. The media got wind of the story about 2 months into the legal proceedings. Local news stations interviewed angry homeowners. One woman cried on camera, saying she feared losing her home. I empathized, but the fact remained. I owned the land, and no one had ever paid me for it. Not a single cent. Some began offering settlements, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, thinking it would appease me. But the damage had already been done. I wasn't just dealing with stolen property, I was dealing with years of property tax discrepancies, potential environmental violations, and the burden of correcting a system-wide failure. Then came the developers. When they realized I wasn't backing down, they tried to shift the blame to the county. The county, in turn, tried to point fingers at a defunct land registry system. Everyone was scrambling. No one wanted to accept responsibility, but no one could deny that I had the title. And in real estate, possession may be 9/10 of the law, but title is the full 10. Months of court hearings followed. At one point, the WA tried to argue adverse possession, but their claim was flimsy. You can't occupy land unknowingly for 10 years and then expect to own it. That's not how the law works. Eventually, the court ruled in my favor. I was officially recognized as the owner of all 61 parcels. The judgment sent shockwaves through the local real estate world. Lawyers began rewriting boilerplate contracts overnight. HOAs across the state were audited for title errors. But for me, the real challenge was just beginning: what to do with the land. Some advised me to bulldoze the homes and sell the land to a new developer. Others said I should sell each parcel individually to the homeowners, at a premium, of course. But I had a better idea. One that wouldn't just solve my problem, but make me a very wealthy man. I put the entire neighborhood up for sale. Not the homes, just the land beneath them. And I priced it like beachfront property. The backlash was immediate. Once word got out that I had listed the land for sale, land that was currently occupied by 61 families who had purchased their homes in good faith, the WA and the residents erupted. I received angry emails, voicemails, even threats. Some called me a heartless opportunist. Others demanded that I just give the land back, or do the right thing. But I wasn't the villain here. I didn't steal anything. I simply inherited land that had been illegally built on. If anything, I had been wronged, not them. Still, I wasn't blind to the emotional weight of the situation. These weren't just plots of dirt and wood-framed structures. These were homes, nurseries, backyards with swing sets, kitchens filled with memories. I understood the pain, but understanding doesn't erase ownership. I had a right to be compensated, and no amount of moral guilt tripping would change the fact that someone owed me, big time. The listing drew attention from private investors and real estate firms across the country. The legal judgment made it clear: I held full rights to the land, and whoever bought it would either own it outright or gain the power to lease it back to the homeowners. The idea of turning the entire neighborhood into a land lease community caught fire. Several large investment companies contacted me, intrigued by the opportunity to create a revenue stream without having to manage the homes themselves. One offer came in at just under $5 million. Another offered slightly less but with a cash upfront option. Meanwhile, the homeowners began organizing. They held meetings in the community clubhouse, pooled funds to hire legal counsel, and created a GoFundMe campaign to save our neighborhood. Some of them attempted to form a cooperative to buy the land themselves. But coordinating that many families, many of whom were already stretched financially, proved to be nearly impossible. The WA board was fractured. Some members wanted to negotiate with me, others wanted to keep fighting, refusing to accept the court ruling. I stayed quiet during most of this. I wasn't interested in humiliating anyone. My attorney handled all communication, and I let the process unfold as it was meant to. But behind the scenes, I was negotiating hard. I had a goal: maximize the value of this situation while minimizing the long-term drama. Eventually, one firm stepped forward with an offer that met both criteria. They were willing to buy the land for $8.3 million with the intent of setting up 99-year ground leases for the current homeowners. That way, no one had to move out, and they'd retain ownership of their homes while paying a modest monthly ground rent. It was a solution that, while not perfect, avoided mass evictions and lawsuits from individual residents. The firm would get long-term passive income. I would walk away with more than I ever imagined from what I thought was an old, useless piece of land. And the homeowners, while not exactly thrilled, would be able to stay put with minimal disruption to their lives. The sale closed 2 months later. Overnight, my bank account ballooned with more money than I'd ever seen. After taxes, legal fees, and a few donations to organizations that helped homeowners facing similar land issues, I was still comfortably in the 7-figure range. The relief was indescribable, not just financially, but emotionally. I had been dragged through the mud, called every name in the book, threatened, and sued. But in the end, justice prevailed. The investors began rolling out their lease agreements shortly after the sale. Most homeowners begrudgingly signed them, realizing that paying a few $100s a month was a far better outcome than trying to uproot their lives. A few tried to sell their homes and move, but with the new land lease terms, their property values initially took a slight hit. Over time, though, the panic faded. The neighborhood settled back into normalcy, and people adjusted to the new reality. I visited the property one last time, quietly, without telling anyone. I parked at the edge of the community and just walked around. No one recognized me, or if they did, no one said anything. I watched a dad help his daughter ride a bike. A woman walked her dog. Someone was barbecuing in their backyard. Life had resumed. The tension had diffused. In many ways, it felt surreal. That land had been sitting dormant for decades, forgotten by everyone but my grandfather. Maybe he always knew its worth. Maybe he didn't. Either way, he left me with a legacy that forced me to step up, confront a flawed system, and see a legal battle through to the end. I learned more about real estate law, human behavior, and power dynamics in 1 year than most people do in a lifetime. I used part of the money to start a trust for my nieces and nephews, something my grandfather would have appreciated. I bought a modest but beautiful home of my own, debt-free. And I invested the rest in real estate, with a sharp eye on zoning laws and land titles, of course. People started coming to me for advice, and I ended up speaking at a few property law seminars about my experience. What started as a fluke inheritance had turned me into a case study. Looking back, it wasn't just about the money, although the financial gain was life-changing. It was about standing up for what was rightfully mine in a situation where almost everyone hoped I'd either back down or disappear. It was about learning how easily systems can fail, and how important it is to protect your rights, even when everyone around you thinks you shouldn't have them in the first place. The homeowners, most of them moved on. Some likely still curse my name under their breath, but others sent quiet messages of thanks for not forcing them out. The wall leadership was replaced within the year. The neighborhood continues to thrive, now part of a national conversation on land ownership and due diligence. As for me, I carry that chapter of my life with equal parts pride and disbelief. It began with a forgotten inheritance and ended with a multi-million-dollar deal. But what I really gained was clarity, the kind you only find when you're pushed to the edge and realize you have more power than anyone thought you did.